Perfect. Okay.
Yeah, signals. We should start there.
Oh
Yeah.
man. Well, I feel like that's good content. Like, let's save that for
Oh,
the
so save that. Okay.
meat of the show.
Okay, let's talk
Um,
about Halloween. Does anybody have any
oh
plans?
yeah. It's supposed to rain here. How
Same
terrible is
here.
that?
We have like 3 parties that we have to go to,
Nice.
and I am surprisingly, I am not a person who likes to do a lot of costume dressing up. For
I'm
all that
surprised.
I know, like for all the dramatic and the flair and everything, I'm like, it takes so much energy. My wife, however, on the other hand, very much into it. And so I think we're gonna work on getting me a pair of galoshes, and then I can wear those over my jeans and walk around with like a Home Depot bucket. And then she's gonna dress up as a hippo, and she's gonna be Mudang and just run around and like just run over and bite me all the time, basically. So I think that's our costume idea at the moment.
That's
Nice.
awesome.
My
We
wife and I did Barbie and Ken.
Oh yeah.
So like that crazy neon outfit from the movie where they go roller skating, that's what we did. And we've got my son was Master Chief from Halo, and my daughter was just like a cheerleader.
And you said did. Was this last year? Or
No, we already did one Halloween event. We did a trunk or treat at the
oh
school, and then
nice.
we're doing it again for tomorrow.
Okay. Now did you wear roller skates?
I
Just
offered, I was like, honey, I can wear like I'm really good at roller skating. And I'm like, I can just wear my skates. And she's like, it's all or nothing, and I'm not doing that. So we were no on roller skates.
Oh, that's so funny. Did she have a wig?
No, she did it just with her black hair. So
Okay. Okay. No, she was like
yeah.
gonna
What
do
did
the
y'all
wig
do?
thing. So I do not have I don't usually dress up. Although last year we were on a Disney cruise and they do like I don't even know what they call it, but they have trick or treating one night.
Cool.
So that was the first year we've ever done an ensemble. Like as a family, we're all going to do something. And my kids love Miraculous. Well, I do too. But have you guys seen this?
No, what's miraculous?
No.
It's also called, or I think of it as Ladybug and Cat Noir.
Oh,
Um, it's a it was on Netflix. I think it's also on Disney. It's I wouldn't call it anime. I mean, it's 3D animated.
Mm.
But anyways, it takes place in Paris. This girl is she's a ladybug superhero. She kind of like transforms. But like even her like she has anyways, I won't go into the plot. I want to go down a rabbit hole. So my daughter was Ladybug. My son was Cat Noir. My other daughter was she was like the fox. I was Queen Bee. And then Henry was the villain. I don't remember his name, but yeah. So it was fun. Actually, if you go to amydutton.me, my website, one of the pictures is all of us. It's super tiny. It's like a 200 by 300 pixel image, but we are all in costume. So I don't have an outfit for this year, but we are planning another cruise and they have pirate night. So that's been the big thing this year is we all got pirate costumes.
nice. Any like you got to milk that for as long as you can. Family style costumes.
So like I said, that's the first time we've done that. And this year all the costumes the kids picked out are completely different. Although both my girls are characters from Descendants. So we're all in on the Disney thing.
Hmm.
Yep. Okay, let me tweet this because that usually helps lift things a little bit. And then we will get into it. Let's see. While I'm pulling this up, I feel like more people are going over to Blue Sky?
Yeah.
I don't even have an account, actually.
It was a list that my coworker Abby made of like people you should follow got retweeted by Dan Abramov, and so suddenly I was like, why are all of these people following me out of nowhere? So that was a weird day.
I have not done anything with my account, and I have like 100 followers. So I want to do something. I'm a little frustrated with Elon. So
Yeah.
I would prefer not to support him.
Yes.
It looks a lot like Twitter. I gotta say.
Mm-hmm.
I just signed up.
Oh, you could get in?
Yeah, it was down this morning, right?
Oh, I meant
Oh.
like invite wise. I had to wait a while.
Oh, I don't know if it's gonna stop me or something, but I just signing up.
Cool. Okay, let's do it.
Yeah.
We're ready to go live. Okay. And hello, chat. I haven't even checked the comments. We are talking about Blue Sky.
Yes.
You should follow me, even though I have not done anything. Self-teach me. Oh, invites aren't required anymore. I have also entertained threads. So I've heard from people that are more active in those places. Oh, perfect. I will follow you. After the show, I've heard that it feels more like old school Twitter, where it was like it's a smaller community, but everybody is kinder, has better conversations, less automated. Sounds
Yeah.
lovely. Okay, I'll go ahead and start. We can go from there. My microphone is being droopy. Okay. What's up? What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Compressed FM, a podcast all about web design and development with a little bit of zest. In today's episode, we will be talking about the latest and greatest features of CSS.
Web development and design, who would have guessed? Well, we can do them both, even add a little zest. So turn up the volume, get ready for the best. Let's get it started in this episode of Compress.
Hello, my name is Amy Dutton. I am a lead maintainer on the Redwood JS core team.
Hey, y'all. My name is Brad Garapi. I'm a senior front-end developer at Stripe.
And on today's show, we have our good friend, Alex. Alex, welcome.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Alex and I met at that conference a couple years ago.
Yeah.
I believe you were giving a talk on CSS, and then we hung out again 2 weeks ago in Cincinnati.
Yeah.
So, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no, it was we did 4 conferences in a row where you and I were both there at the same time, so it was
I think that's the best thing about speaking at conferences in general is you start going and you meet friends, and even when you go to conferences and you go in not knowing anybody, it's like, oh, my friends are still here. So it's nice. Today's episode is sponsored by Wix Studio, and I just want to give them a huge shout out because historically I've thought of Wix as a no-code, low-code solution, but lately they have done a lot for the developer community and with tech. So not only are they catering to people that actually have to build the sites, but also for the marketers, the business people, the salespeople, so that everybody has the best experience. You have the ability to customize and get the sites that you create to do exactly what you need, but also satisfy the maintenance of those and helping the rest of the company that actually has to maintain and work with the site. So it is really the best of both worlds. So in a future episode, we should have somebody from Wix Studio actually on telling us and sharing how they built Wix, all the things that they're working on, and some of the latest and greatest features. So we're looking forward to that episode. But special thanks to Wix Studio for sponsoring today's episode. Sweet. So Alex, let's talk about the latest and greatest CSS. You actually did get a shout out on the episode we recorded last week because one of the things that I said was that I love the fact that I consider myself a CSS wizard. I know a lot, even though I use Tailwind. I've been working with CSS forever, but I still learn things from your talk. So I really appreciated how you hit all the different levels, and I'll highlight, maybe we can start there. The thing that I learned was that CSS is a typed language, which I should have known. I just didn't think about. Meaning that if you try and enter a pixel value for color, it's not going to work. Or if you try and enter a color value for the width or height, that's not going to work. So it is typed. But the important thing to note is if you create a custom property or like a variable within CSS, you can actually control the type of that. So you get feedback within the browser, which is pretty amazing.
Yeah, they've been working on that feature for a bit now, and it finally is cross-browser compatible as of July, I think. So it's still like it's been in Chrome for a bit, for like a couple of years, and then I think Firefox may have been the last holdout, and they added support for it in July. So it's great. It's super cool. And you can also, what the other nice thing about that is that with at property, you can also tell variables not to inherit, which
Oh,
means
yeah.
that you can apply it to a specific element and it only does the thing for that element. Which is nice if you're wanting to do like encapsulated custom properties, CSS variables, where it's like, oh, okay, cool. Like I need to calculate something. You don't want that calculation to like cascade down into everything else. Makes it super nice and handy.
The other thing that I remember being a big takeaway for me was you kind of gave the backstory on layers, which was interesting.
Yeah, and I heard that story. I think I heard Miriam Suzanne tell that story, I believe. And it's that we've had this concept of multiple layers of CSS in the browser for forever. But you've never had access to them. You've always been able to like override user agent styles. And so the user agent styles are a layer, right? They're just sort of like, these rules exist. Anything can override them, right? And so there was a proposal that was basically like, we have this thing already. What if we just let people like make their own, right? And so I believe it went through sort of the approvals process pretty quickly because like it was already built and they just sort of had to be like, oh, okay, cool. You just need us to be able to like make a new one whenever you want to. Sure. Yeah, we can. Yeah, great. So yeah, it's one of my favorite new things that I haven't fully figured out the best way to use yet. So I think that there are a couple more proposals with it to make the user experience for it a little bit better. The biggest caveat to it is the default layer. So if you don't provide a layer and you just write CSS, that overrides any layer that you define, right? Which is okay. But the challenge is that if a third-party library, JavaScript library, comes in and injects some CSS into your page, well, what are you going to do? And I believe that there is a proposal that says, hey, let's allow people to define where the default layer goes in the order of things so that you can override things that get thrown in.
Yeah, and that was one of those features that I was kind of amazed at how quickly I found a use case for it. Spinning up a new project, you're pulling in different CSS resets and CSS base styles, and you're like, oh, like this is perfect for layers because one was overriding the other, and then you just slot it in where it needs to go.
Yeah, it makes it great because you can really go hard on your reset and use whatever selectors you want, and it'll absolutely not override anything else.
Yeah, and it's not one of those features. I feel like CSS has had some complex features come out recently, and layers was just simple to the point and very useful.
Yeah, yeah. And there is complexity to it. Like you can get like nested layers where it's like this is a layer inside of a layer, and so like then you can reorder those, and it's just like okay, yeah, you can do really complicated things with it if you want to, but you don't have to. It's very straightforward.
Do you want to highlight some of the other features that you mentioned in your talk?
Yeah. So the talk in question, I've been giving this talk for 2 years, and it's been great watching the audience for it because I sort of start off the talk with like a vibe check of like what do people know about, what have people heard about. And over the 2 years, the first time that I gave this talk, I was talking about features and I had no hands were raised for a whole bunch of these features that I was talking about. And the last time that I gave it, last week in Oklahoma was there were people that knew about every single thing that was in this list, and I was like, this is excellent, we're doing good. Like, I'm not like things are improving. So that's good. So one of so part the talk goes all the way back to like CSS grid to make sure that like we understand what custom properties are, right? CSS variables, we understand what CSS grid is. Let's cover that a little bit, and then I launch into some of the newer-ish things that people don't know about. Logical properties is a good one, is sort of a good example of that. With logical properties, we, instead of defining things based on top, left, right, and bottom, you define things based on their inline position or their block position. And so if you're used to using flex, you're used to using the words like flex start if you want to align something at the beginning, and flex end if you want to align something at the end, right? And so this sort of extends that concept of you have inline start and inline end and block start and block end, and that will allow you to align things. And so there's a whole bunch of properties that have that. Margin has that now, padding has that now. There's a whole bunch of them. I can't, there were enough of them that I haven't updated my list, and there were already like 60 of them. So all over the place, whole bunch of stuff all over the place.
Let me ask you a question about that. And this is going to be me being like, I'm really sorry, a dumb American, where I'm just like in my little hole speaking English and I can only speak one language. Is there a benefit to using those, even if you're not worried about other languages that aren't just left to right?
Yeah. So what's great about logical properties is it removes the weirdness of trying to remember like where you're putting things, right? Like, am I looking at the left or am I looking at the right? Just, put it at the end, put it at the start. There's also some nicer shorthands that we get from it. So previously, if you wanted to set your margin left and your margin right, you'd have to do something weird where you'd be like, okay, cool. So I need to do like either two definitions, margin left, margin right, or I'm going to have to do like a shorthand of margin where we do like 0 or something for the first thing and then the thing that I actually want for the right. And now you can just do like margin inline, and that gives you left and right at the same time. And you can do margin block, and that gives you like top and bottom at the same time. And that shorthand exists for anything that has logical properties. Okay. So that's one nice feature. Another nice feature is even if you're not internationalizing your website, people use Google Translate. And if someone with a right to left language translates your website, if you're using logical properties, the styles will automatically change over when Google Translate does Google Translate. So
I did not know that. That's awesome. Yeah.
Yeah. You get it like out of the box. Like it is, you just get it for free. Like it's there. So that's the big selling point, is like, even if you're not doing it, it'll do it for you if you just use these things.
Sweet. Yeah, that one's a no-brainer, and I'm assuming it's supported everywhere. I've been using it for a while and haven't found any issues.
Several years at this point. I don't remember exactly when that one fully hit. And it's one of those where it's not, I don't know that they have done all of the properties that use like top, left, right, and bottom. But they are like, they're making their way through and like finding the ones where they're like, oh, right, we forgot about this one, right? And so then they add it in and, release it. So it's one of those where it's like they just keep adding more of them over time.
Speaking of like,
oh, go ahead.
Speaking of like browser support, do you find that any one of the major browsers is like really pushing ahead with new CSS features or lagging behind in particular, or is it kind of different for each one?
Yes, it's different for each one. It's fascinating to watch what each browser is focusing on.
Mm-hmm.
So the one that I got to complain about this one actually in Oklahoma. There was a Mozilla employee, and I was like, so anybody here work on Firefox? And one person raised their hand. I'm like, all right, I got a few things to say. But no, so Firefox is sort of falling behind a little bit. I will be honest about that. They're lagging behind a little bit in several areas, and some of it is, they're in a weird position of like, they're having funding things going on right now. They're having They've had a lot of layoffs over the years, and so like it makes sense, but also at the same time, like they're at the forefront of stuff too. Like there are things that they've implemented that nobody else has. So and all the browsers are that way. Safari is like super leading the charge on a lot of things, and a
Jen
lot of
Simmons.
and yeah, it's Jen Simmons. A lot of it is like Jen Simmons, and I think that there's a lot of internal advocacy happening there that we're not seeing necessarily. Like she's very vocal and like really takes feedback from people about stuff, and then we'll just go radio silence for a while, and then like a few months later we'll show up and be like, okay, cool, we have a whole bunch of new things for you, right? And
Do you feel that like specifically in the Apple case,
yeah,
do you feel like it's this want to push the web forward, or do you almost feel like it's product driven or design driven, where like I heard Apple was early to some of the scroll driven animation stuff because they had use cases for marketing websites and things like that?
I think a little bit of it is some of the design stuff, right? There are certain properties, things that exist in browsers because Apple was like, we need to be able to have a product image and have a reflection of it, right? So we need a CSS property that does that, and so there was some CSS property that we got based on that, right? So in that way, like, yeah, there are times where like their design stuff is pushing what their browser can do. Other times, I think it really is. A lot of it is Jen Simmons going, "Hey, here's what people are talking about,"
Yeah.
and quite honestly, actually, the bigger push is the CSS interop program, which, if you're not aware of, the major browser vendors and people who work on them get together every year and create a list of things that they are like, here are the things that we need to accomplish by the end of the next year, right? So they've just published the list for the Interop 2025. So those are all the things that they're going to work towards in 2025. We're finishing up 2024. And like, that list is not always like, ooh, new shiny features. Sometimes that list is just like, hey, here's a thing that y'all are being really inconsistent about. Can y'all agree on how this is supposed to work and implement it, and going back and like fixing things? So yeah, it's a huge project that like I highly recommend that you go check out all the time, because they're always keeping it up to date as to like what they're doing, what they're working on.
That's fascinating. I had no idea.
Yeah.
Did you see, I think even this week, this kind of counts, not really. So I use Arc. It's built on top of Chrome. They've said they're going to totally shift gears and pivot. Like, what? Why?
Yeah. I have a bunch of people who are real upset about that.
Yeah.
And I think the browser company is like, oh yeah, no, we're going to continue supporting Arc, right? But we need to make something simpler with AI built into it, right? Or whatever.
I don't know. I think it's the right call. Like, I get it. I was thinking that AI's next like frontier is to kind of be able to control your computer for you. You just kind of like speak into a text box or type into a text box, and it kind of figures out everything on your computer for you. And I thought, like, if Arc was going to pivot, don't jam it into my web browser. Give me a different thing. And I kind of liked that, because now that AI is everywhere, it kind of bugs me when I see it, you know?
Mm-hmm. Well, and I think that like it's a smart move on their part to be like, hey, like we've run what we can with this experiment. Let's try something else, right? In that regard, I think it's a very smart move on their part to be like, okay, cool. What else can we innovate, right? We've sort of we've pushed the boundaries of what we can do over here. Some of those features have actually been kind of adopted back into like Edge and Chrome and maybe some other browsers as well.
Yeah.
And so they're like, okay, cool. We've done some of that. Let's go try something else rather than going super complex. Let's go simple.
And I wonder maybe if this is a play for revenue as well, right? Like, Arc is free, so what are they going to do? Maybe they do need to come out with something to like bring in some money and go from there.
Yeah.
This is a good time to like stop and talk about browsers too. Like, has anybody shifted around what they're using? Like, Amy, I heard you're on Arc. Alex, what do you use nowadays?
I use all of them.
Oh, yeah, there you go.
A couple
Opera?
of. Oh no, stay away from that. A couple of years ago, actually, you know, many years ago, I had switched over to using sort of a separate password manager, right? And the last big thing, I am a big proponent of like, we just use bookmarks, right? Like you should use bookmarks because bookmarks are good. And they keep down, I am team close all the tabs all the time. I don't need 20 billion tabs open in the browser, right? And so I'm a big proponent of like, just use bookmarks. And so bookmarks were kind of the thing that always made it a challenge for me to switch between browsers. And my friend Cassidy Williams said, oh, well, I'm using this service called Raindrop for bookmarks, and it has a extension. And I'm like, as long as I can install 1Password and Raindrop into the browser, I can use whatever browser it is. So
Yeah,
on my
cool.
Mac, my personal Mac, I use Safari. On my work computer, I use Edge. On my Windows machine, I use Edge. I use Firefox on some of my Linux machines. Like I use all of them all the time because I'm just like, it doesn't matter. I have the things that I need and I can make it work. So
Awesome.
Pitch
Yeah,
me a raindrop. Oh, sorry, Red.
No, yeah, I want to hear about it.
okay, cool. Do you have links that you need to be able to like track and tag and share?
Yes.
Yeah. So imagine that, but like it's also your personal bookmark library. There you go. That's it. It has an API. It has public pages that you can be like, oh, let me share this public page with people.
Cool.
I think I have 2 public pages. One is like public links, and then one is links shared with no context. And it's just, I can just put whatever I want to in there, and I don't have to like provide a description. I can just be like, this is a link, and I like it, and I think people should know about it. It's got an extension, but also you can just visit it as a website. I have an API that my wife and we play some daily games. So like Wordle, the New York Times mini crossword, a whole bunch of other things. I have a whole list of them. And the problem with that is we do that before I have my coffee. And so you're constantly like looking down this list of like 20 games that we just go through. And I'm having to be like, what? Where are we? What's the next one? Right? So I made a little app that just like has a cookie. It tracks which game you just did. And you click on a link that just says play next. And it'll look at the one that you were just on and then pick the next one. And like,
that's nice.
It just takes you through the list. And that's all. I just pull from the Raindrop API. And so when I want to update the links, right, I just change my bookmarks. That's it. That's all it is. And yeah, so it's a great service. Highly recommend it if you are a person who likes bookmarks.
Now, I have this pulled up. Are you a paid or a free? Okay.
I am a paid. It is well worth it.
Now, I do like what you were talking about, how bookmarks kind of solve the tab problem, because that's why I have tabs for days. Is I'm like, oh, I'm working on a project, and if I'm trying to solve a problem, I just keep opening tabs until I solve that problem, and then I go through and close out all those tabs. Or if I went, that's the nice thing about Arc that it kind of solves for me, is you have these different spaces. And so then I just go to the space of whatever project I'm working on, and there are all my things for that particular project. But that's kind of interesting that you've solved that same problem a different way.
Yeah. And like, I've been collecting bookmarks. I've heavily used the favorites bar because I've been, using browsers for way too long at this point. And like, so I've amassed a collection of bookmarks that I was having to like constantly like, I have to export them in the right way, and then I have to re-import them, and being able to just have the extension there is like, oh great, okay, cool. So they're all in Safari now, and they're all in and I have them on my phone and whatever. So
I'm also old enough that I use Delicious.
Yeah.
Was the thing.
Yeah, I remember Delicious.
I loved it.
Yeah.
I've been kind of in on Safari lately, mostly for like personal browsing. It just works really, really well with the Mac, and I did decide to go all in on the Apple password manager. Some folks might not love that decision just because like you can't tie your passwords to an operating system, but they've got a Chrome extension. It's on your phone. It's on your computer. You can kind of put it where it needs to go. And so I've just been using Safari for all of like my personal browsing and stuff. And I found it to be really fast, really pleasant, really well integrated. And then it's still very apparent that you need Chrome, like some Chromium-based browser, like any kind of streaming software like StreamYard or Zoom will be like, you should probably just use Chrome instead.
Yeah.
So
there's
it has its use for development stuff too. Like I use Chrome for development.
Yeah, I have been using Safari on my personal Mac for a while now, and like it's one of those where I keep like Edge or Chrome installed because occasionally you run into a website where you're like, well, it's just not working, so I'm gonna try it in Chrome, and oh, yep, now it works. Great. Okay. So relying on some JavaScript API that only Chrome has. So yeah, if we're talking about Chrome-based browsers, my personal preference is Edge. Edge is pretty good, as long as you take the 15 to 30 minutes when you first open it to turn off all the things that are really annoying. It's great.
That's funny. Okay. Are you guys? I don't want to jump ahead. This is a little behind the scenes. There's some CSS properties I still want to talk about before we jump ship on CSS. Okay. So if we jump back a little bit to the CSS conversation, there are a few properties that I have really enjoyed using that I just feel like magical when I implement them. Container queries is probably one of them, especially if I'm doing like an application and product design. Let me give a use case. I can have, say, a row for how I want content to be displayed, but then maybe I want to reuse that row of content on, say, a dashboard. And because the container that row is in looks different on the dashboard than it does in the actual content, I can still use the same display, the same HTML, the DOM structure, and then just use CSS to change how that looks on, say, the dashboard versus an interior page. And the nice thing is, because it's in a container query, it works whether that's on desktop in a small area or on mobile in a small area. So I love the fact that I have control over that, not based on the browser size, but based on the container.
The thing with container queries that I love that isn't support for it isn't quite there yet. I think Chrome has this and Safari might have this. That's coming. It's going to like revolutionize how we do things in CSS and blah, blah, blah. Is style queries. You can you can define a custom property and then do a container query and say, when this container has the style of custom property name : value, do this other styling. And you can literally then just toggle in your CSS. You have an if statement. You have an if statement at that point that you can just do things with. And it is, that's going to, like, there's like 3 features that we're almost there with in the browsers that we can almost use. And once they're in the browsers, whatever you know about design systems or like styling whatever, there's about to be a giant wave of just like, here is a new way to do things. And you can do things completely differently from the way that you've ever done them before.
Okay,
does it make it like simpler to write or more complex to reason about? I don't know, because I wrote like a has selector the other day and I still look at it and I'm just like, is it like, does it feel good? Does it make it easier to understand? Because some of these new CSS features I feel like are like use cases don't immediately jump out to me. Like you don't know you need it until you run across that time where you need it, you know?
Yes. And
so it almost goes in one ear and out the other.
Yeah, and I always try to provide really good examples. So container queries, the example that I give, that's an easy one, is pagination, right? We've all probably written a pagination component of some sort, right? You have links at the bottom of a page, and you have 1, 2, 3, ... 4, 5, 6, ... whatever, right? Like you have like this thing, and it takes up space. And you want that thing to look like that. But when you get to a smaller screen size, you need it to be like a mobile view. Maybe it's a drop down that has like maybe it's a form with a drop down, you hit go and it takes you to the correct page or whatever, right? Like it becomes a different interface because you need to be able to use it on a smaller screen. The way that you can handle that with a container query that you can't with a media query is if you have your pagination component and for some reason you are putting it in a modal. The modal
Yep.
is smaller than the screen size, so it's going to try to do the full screen size if you're doing a media query. So what you do is that you say, hey, here's the container around the pagination. When it's smaller than this, make it do the mobile view, and then you can put it in a small modal and it still works. And it's stuff like that where it's like you will run into very specific use cases of it. Another one that I do is, standard layout of like header, sidebar, content section, footer. The sidebar can collapse. It's expandable, so it can be like big version, small version. And so if you put a container around your content, there you go. Rather than doing media queries for anything that goes in the content area, you just do a container query and you say, hey, when this container is this size, do the thing, and then it doesn't care how big the sidebar is. And you don't have to track like is expanded, is not expanded, or whatever. So yeah, there you go.
Brilliant. So let me ask you this. Are there okay, hold on. I have like 5 questions that my head just got bombarded by.
Yeah.
What are the other 2 things that you said are going to revolutionize CSS? You said this thing,
So
and then
yeah, style
else?
queries is
Okay.
one of them. Layers, if they can figure out the default layer thing,
Okay.
that'll be huge, right? That's going to be suddenly you'll be able to be like, yeah, third-party library, great. All of your styles are going to live way back here, and I'm just going to override them. The other one is scope. So at scope, and this is the one that I yelled at Mozilla about. They have a bug open about it. So we've all, the lofty goal, and this has been proposed multiple times, is scope styles. So being able to say, hey, use these styles only in this place, right? And so at scope allows you to take a style tag, stick it inside of a div, and do at scope, and then provide some styles. And those styles only apply to everything inside of that div.
Crazy. So pause for a second.
Yeah.
Isn't that kind of like how something might work if you're doing React or Svelte, where you have a style block inside a component?
Yeah.
But now it's like available to the wider.
Yeah. It's just in the
Okay.
standard. It'd do the thing. You can use this in Chrome right now. I believe you can actually use it in Safari as well. And I think Firefox is the one that's like,
Interesting.
no, why would we? No, we're not gonna. The other thing about scope is that it has the secondary syntax that it has is that it allows you to say, hey, start the scope. So you can do at scope and provide a selector and say, start this scope at this selector. So you can give it like a class and say, when we're inside of this class, use this styling, right? And then you can say, I don't remember what the exact syntax is, but you can say, okay, cool, do this selector to this other selector. And it'll make a donut shape where you can basically go start this styling here and then go for this long and then stop this styling once you hit this thing. And it'll stop doing that type of styling for everything inside of that thing. So you sort of get this like donut shape of DOM.
So is that like when you have like nested ordered lists or unordered lists? Okay, that's cool.
Yeah, you could be like, everything with a border has a red border until you get to a TD, and then everything inside of that doesn't have a red border anymore, right? Like you could be like, my table has red borders and then, or hot pink borders, because that's my example color all the time. Hot pink borders until you get to the TD, and then anything inside of that doesn't have a hot pink border anymore.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Is there anything in CSS right now that you're like, I wish we had this? It's not on the radar, or maybe it is on the plans. But it's like, this is the thing that we are lacking.
Gosh, there's so many new things coming out that it's really hard to think of things where it's like, oh yeah, we should have something like that. There's one that I keep on running into. I can't remember what it is, but it's like the thing that there's a proposal for, and I don't know if it's actually been implemented yet. I think it's sort of been implemented, kind of. The documentation is a bit weird around it. I need to read into it a little bit more. Is the idea of like being able to do a transition from like display none to display block, or being able to say like, hey, do this transition, do the display transition and then do all of these other ones after it, right? So like turn it on and then do all of these things. Because right now, if you try to do a transition on like display, nothing happens. Like
That's right.
It just ignores it.
It doesn't animate. Well, and we just got height being able to automate or animate to auto.
Yeah.
Which
So
crazy,
we don't have to do we don't have to do a grid hack on that anymore. It used to be for a while there. The hack was that you define like a grid with a size 0, and then you say, okay, cool. Now it becomes 1FR because that is a united value, and so it can calculate that. And they were like, oh, we're doing that math already. Okay, cool. Let's just move it over.
I love that you just said the hack is, and then you provided a CSS example. In my head, I'm like, the hack is JavaScript, but you can do so much right now with just CSS alone that doesn't have to be the first response of I'm just going to reach for JavaScript.
Yeah. There's so many things where we're moving from needing JavaScript, like parent selector is the classic example. There's so many things where previously, in order to do an inspection of what's inside of it, using the parent selector, you'd have to use JavaScript to do, is the thing that I need inside of here? If so, apply a class, apply an attribute to a parent element. And with the parent selector, the has selector, you can say selector has thing inside of it, right? And it'll do it, and you don't have to use JavaScript anymore. It cuts down on a lot.
Yeah, I think the example you gave, don't you love it when people like drop your own quotes? The example you gave when you were giving your talk is if you have a input and you can get validation on that input and you can style the container or like the parent div based on the input inside.
Yeah.
So you can have like the whole form turns green when the input is validated.
Yeah. If any input inside of this form is invalid, the form gets a red border on it and display the warning message at the top, right? Like there you go. And it'll
no JavaScript.
Okay, what's left that requires JavaScript? Is there anything that sticks out to you?
The one thing, oh no, this is the one. Okay, so the two things that I know are being talked about, I have no idea where they are in their track. One is there's a function in CSS called attr, ATTR, that allows you to say, okay, give me the attribute called this, give me the value of that. And right now that only returns a string. The only thing you can get out of it is a string, which is great if you're doing like content. That's about it. There's nothing else you can use it for. They're working on making it so that can be typed, so that you can say, this is going to be a color, right? I'm expecting this to be a color. So go give me this attribute. I'm expecting it to be a color. And then you can apply it to anything that's a color. So that's one thing. The other one is that we cannot do in CSS right now, and we need JavaScript for, is getting the number of the thing that you are on. So if you are in a list of things, where am I in the index? Like what index am I at? What positionally am I at? And let me do some math based on that, right?
Sure.
Can't do that right now. You have to use JavaScript. You have to use something to say, here's the index of the thing. Give yourself a custom property that has it, and then you can do things. But if we can get the ability to count as a number in CSS, there you go. We'd be able to, there's a whole host of things that just suddenly magically open up.
Yes. Okay. The example for this is coming to me. So on Wes Boss's website, he's got like his navigation is 2 rows, and it changes based on how wide the screen is, right? And so the first row is kind of like bigger and more prominent, and then whatever gets pushed down to the second row is kind of smaller. And so if you knew where that index was, you could just say, hey, anything after this, give it the font size of small or whatnot.
Yeah. Another great example of this is that would make doing FizzBuzz in CSS a lot more interesting. Being able to know which number you're on. You can do FizzBuzz in CSS now, but it would be a lot easier if you could do it based on the number.
Wait. So okay, going back to like the types thing, I'm kind of curious if that information is like surfaced in the editor, do you get red squiggles? And like, if so, what's providing that functionality? Is there a
Oh.
CSS like language server or extension that you have to install or something like
I
that?
don't know. Actually, that's a really great question. I think properties new enough that they haven't added, a lot of places haven't added the editor support for it yet.
Sure.
Right? Because I know that there are like SaaS ones, right? So it wouldn't be that big of a leap to be like, oh, okay, cool. Instead of looking for $, blah, right? And like go look for a thing called et property and then let me get the types based off of that, right? So, anybody listening,
Yeah. Build it.
we would all appreciate it if you listening decided, oh, I got a bee on my bonnet, I should make that.
Is there any like how is that type information surfaced at all today? Does it spit out like a console warning or something?
Browser dev tools, if you were
Okay.
to like assign a value to a thing, right, that is not the right type. Today it would, if you were to try to assign a pixel value to a color and you go look in dev tools, it'll just cross it straight through and give you a
Right.
little like warning box next to that property and be like, this is not the right type. I'm
Okay.
pretty sure dev tools do that for things, anything that is improperly
Yes.
typed. So that would be how you would figure it out.
Yeah, that would be sick to get it in the editor. Just like TypeScript, get a red
Yeah.
squiggle and be like, we want this type.
It's a well documented. It is spec'd. It is well documented.
Yeah.
And so you would be very easy to. I say very easy. It would be doable to make a language server for that. So
Yeah. And given that there's not like all this generic typing and nested types, they're all just pretty much primitives at that point, or literals. It should be pretty straightforward.
Yeah. So you could it would be relatively easy to reason about. But yeah, those are the other big thing that I know that there's a proposal for, and I feel like there's been multiple proposals for this, but there are new people running the standards, are custom functions and custom mixins for CSS. The way that I tell it is basically all the people who were building Sass and less back in the day, they grew up, and the people who were defining the standards, they also grew up, and they needed new people to help define the standards. So they got people who knew a lot of things about CSS, which were the people who made less in Sass. And they were like, hey, you know what we could do? We put this in the browser.
This is like the jQuery comes to the browser moment for CSS, for Sass.
Yeah, really is.
Yeah, there are still some things, I guess, in Sass that I used to use that I don't have access to anymore. Like you mentioned mixins. There's the extends.
Yeah.
And you could also do like loops. That was really helpful too. Oh, and mapping. Mapping was helpful.
Yeah.
So
yeah, so there's still a few things that like Sass and less and all the other pre-compilers are still extremely useful for. But it gets less and less all the time.
Pun intended or no pun
intended? I'll take it. So.
Hilarious. Is there anything that you wanted to cover with CSS that we've not touched on?
No.
Okay.
Except that if anybody from Firefox is listening, please enable scope. Please make scope work because I need that personally.
Perfect. Done. Okay, I'm going to pivot just a little bit because Alex, you're super smart with CSS. Oh, I did have one more thing with CSS I want to cover before I pivot.
Yeah.
Talk to me about Tailwind. I'm going to get a little spicy take here.
All right, so let's start. How long do you have? How long do we have? Utility class libraries as a concept are not bad. I want to start off there and make that abundantly clear from the get-go. Utility class libraries like Tailwind, like Uno CSS, like Windy CSS, not a bad idea. They're very useful being able to say, oh, make this color red, right? Brilliant. Love it. Oh, I need to add a little padding here. Fine. Great. Go for it. There is no argument that is good enough to convince me in any world that you should put 800 classes on an element. there is not a single instance anywhere where I think that is acceptable. So yeah, if you want to use it as a design token library, that's fine. Use @apply, which, go make the creator of Tailwind really mad by using it. But yeah, no, Tailwind is a perfectly fine thing to use as a utility class library. If you try to build the Taj Mahal using nothing but Swiss Army knives, you're gonna have a bad time.
I feel like the minute you get into like dark mode stuff,
yeah,
Tailwind kind of falls apart a little bit.
The moment that you try to do responsive stuff, you have to be like, oh,
yeah,
okay,
yeah,
this,
that too.
and then this at MD, and then this at SM, and it's like, this is Bootstrap with extra steps at this point.
If you're building one thing, one view, one style, one theme, great.
Mm-hmm.
Like it, and you can still use the cascade, right? You put it on there properly. Don't drill down to the lowest level. Don't over specify. But yeah, all the variations make it go nuts, and there's just no better way to handle that.
My favorite argument that I get from people is, well, thinking of class names is hard. So you just make like a component that has the styling that you want. And I'm like, what do you call that component? That's your class name.
Right. It's the argument. It's the same argument.
Yeah.
I do like Tailwind, and I find myself using it a lot because what I build is simple and non-complex, and I don't have to solve for every case.
Right. And like I said, like utility class libraries are perfectly. We use it at work. There are times I find myself going like, oh, I need a little bit more padding here, blah, right? Like, it's fine. But it's the like, oh, you have to use it for everything that I entirely disagree with.
And people don't realize that like those are just classes. Like, right, you can write your own CSS file and do whatever you want well.
The thing I keep threatening people with is like, I'm going to come into your Tailwind library, your Tailwind project, whatever, and I'm just going to secretly add a little bit of CSS somewhere that's .flex display block and let you
figure it
lose
out.
your mind.
Add a layer.
Yeah.
The default layer. Oh, that's so funny. I love the spicy take. I'm like Brad, I use Tailwind quite a bit, but there are a few pain points where I'm like, I know better. Like, I know this isn't the best solution. Like, there's a few things with Tailwind that drives me crazy, like the fact that the padding system or the pixel system isn't always consistent. So like you'll have like rounded is a prime example where I feel like you go from small, medium, large, and it's like, no. Like I want like bring back the rims. Like I knew what I was working with there. Or there's instances where, say, like I am working with navigation, so I have multiple list items and I know they're all going to need the same class, and it still just feels gross to put the exact same styles on every single one. So then what I do is I go create another CSS file and I stick it in there, but then that kind of defeats the point of using Tailwind. You have some styles over here, some styles over there, and I've run into situations where I'm like, where is this coming from? Just because there's inconsistency.
Yeah. Well, and the other sort of example, I completely just lost it. There's another place where it's like you're trying to, you have the list, you have a large number of things, so you're copying and pasting, and somebody says this color's wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Now what? Like, okay, you got to go like search replace for that, and then but actually that one was right, so don't change that one, right? And you're like, come on, like. So,
or another good one, this makes sense to stick it inside a custom property, is if you want to say, you know what, my height for my header is going to be 130 pixels. And then you end up using that inside a calc, like you hard code that in because it's Tailwind, but then the header size changes. Then you've got to go through and figure out where all those calc items are, where, if you're just using a custom property, you could have just changed the variable.
Yep. Yeah, there's a lot of that, of like we're sort of we're in the process of de-tailwinding our code base a little bit.
Oh, really?
And part of that what we're doing with that is like, okay, cool. And I hear that this is better with Tailwind 4. We're on Tailwind 3, so I know don't all the haters out there, you're already going to come for me, so don't come for me for this. But in Tailwind 4, you get to define all of your like custom stuff as CSS variables.
Yeah.
So you define it in a CSS file, and then Tailwind figures it out from there. And the thing that we're doing in our 3 code base is that we're taking all of the like colors and stuff, and we're saying, okay, cool, go ahead and export them as CSS variables, so that then we can use the CSS variables in places and stuff like that. And I imagine that you could, with the new Tailwind configuration stuff, that'll become easier to be like, hey, I have a height for my header, and here's the value for it, and Tailwind will then generate the classes that you need for it, and it'll just
Interesting.
cascade.
Yeah, I haven't dug into it too much. I did use on my current site, I was just trying to get something up quickly, use the Tailwind UI portfolio project or whatever. And I believe Adam wrote that with all CSS variables. And it was not fun to update. Just throw it out there. I was trying to find where that variable was defined, or even when you see it in code, I have no idea what that means. And so it was not as easy as it could have been.
Yeah.
And another like continued problem that Tailwind is going to run into is as CSS updates and evolves and becomes more dynamic and gets, cooler selectors and things like that, people are going to be like, well, how do I do that in Tailwind? And Tailwind's going to have to figure out how to solve that problem too. And like eventually CSS is going to get to the point where like static classes aren't going to cut it for one reason or another. And Adam's always been really creative about coming up with solutions for this stuff, like the has selector and everything. But one day I think it's just going to fall apart, and it's like, yeah, okay, we can't support this. And there'll be this line in the sand where it's like, you have to use vanilla CSS and Tailwind. And now like people will start reevaluating.
Well, and I think that we've almost reached that point already. I mean, they're having to do
Mhm.
that from 3 to 4. Is that in 3, with the way that the preprocessor works, they were using at layer to define layers of Tailwind stuff. That's not a Cascade layer. That is a Tailwind specific thing, and that all compiles
Oh.
out. That's not an actual Cascade layer. And
I
so
didn't know
they had
that.
to rework all of that for Tailwind 4, because it's not doing what you think it's doing if you read the spec, right? Like, it's not doing what you think it's doing. So like they've already hit that issue of like, oh yeah, we can't support this feature because we're using it for something else already.
Interesting. Okay, I am going to go ahead and move on to the next section. Alex, we are going to have you back on to talk about Vue.
Yes.
Oh, right. We didn't even get to Vue.
Yeah. So that would be another hour at least.
Yeah, I'm sure that, with React 19 being ready to come out any day now, like it has been for
the last year.
I'm sure that, any day now you'll have like a good React episode, and then you can have me on to talk about Vue. So,
oh man. Well, we've said that if you're a guest on 5 times, you get a jacket, like SNL. If you host SNL 5 times, you get a special jacket. So.
All right, I'll come up with 3 more topics I can talk about.
Awesome. The next section of the show is our Pick Some Plug section, where we pick something that we like and we plug something generally that we've worked on. So who wants to go first?
I mean, I can go first
Do
if
it.
you want me to. Okay.
Do it.
So, pick.
Yes.
We are avid fans of Dropout.tv. I don't know if anybody else has.
I don't even know what that is.
So Dropout.tv was previously the streaming service that was associated with College Humor. Back in like 2020, College Humor folded, but they Sam Reich bought the rights to Dropout. And so Dropout.tv is a streaming service. And one of their main shows is Dimension 20, which is Dungeons and Dragons and great storytelling. The show that they just released, though, which is hilarious and brilliant, is called Gastronauts. It is a cooking reality TV show style thing, like game show style thing, right? They bring in 3 professional chefs, and then they have 3 improviser comedians who say, here is the thing that I want you to cook. I want you to cook based on this theme, and they present a theme, and the cooks have to go cook that thing. And so the very first one was Brennan Lee Mulligan going, all right, I need you to cook me the heaviest food. Good food is heavy. I want you to be able to take this dish and knock me unconscious with it because it's so heavy. And like, it's that style of prompt where the chefs are like, you, okay. And so they're all like, adding like just like really heavy ingredients and building like, just like, it's hilarious. Highly recommend.
That's awesome.
And then the plug is I'm speaking at a couple more conferences coming up. If y'all are in the Atlanta area or near the Atlanta area, Connect Tech. I will be there in November.
Me too.
Along with Amy. And then I will also be speaking at Code Mash in Ohio in January, which I highly recommend. That is a fantastic conference. And if you haven't been and you are nearby within a couple of hours, absolutely highly recommend. It is an amazing conference.
Awesome. Do you want to plug also your social handles?
Oh yeah, I can do that. If you want to reach out to me and find out more about CSS or yell at me about Tailwind, you can find me on X, Twitter, whatever we're calling it these days, at Fimion, Fimion. I'm also on Blue Sky at dangitalex.wtf. And I am on Mastodon, if you are more into elephants, at Fimion at notaccult.social.
Or if you work for Mozilla.
Or if you work for Mozilla, feel free to reach out to me, and I would love to have a conversation because I have a few complaints.
Suggestions. Brad, you want to go?
Yeah. So I guess I'm gonna pick this. This is gonna sound like a weird one. I told my wife I would commit and watch a full season of Love is Blind with her. And so we've just been
Really?
getting into like the reality TV, dating, drama stuff. And the reunion is tonight. So we're pretty excited about that. She's been watching for a long time, but she told me that this season was apparently pretty tame. Everybody was like on the up and up. There wasn't a whole lot of drama, but I'm looking forward to the reunion because I think it's going to be the spiciest episode out of the whole season. So it's been something fun to like bond over and watch together. And we're going to like have popcorn tonight and watch the finale. Be cool.
That's awesome. What do you want to plug?
Plug? I mean, I just made a Blue Sky account. So, let's
and by just made, it was at the beginning of the show. There you go.
Yes, it was at the beginning of the show. I have 5 followers, so like I'm growing crazy fast.
Rapid fire.
I need to figure out though what this like whole, because I didn't have like a custom domain name, but can't I link it to like my website and put like a header on there or something to like make it my domain? That'd be kind of cool.
Yeah, there's like a DNS record you have to make or something.
Yes. I got to figure out how to do that. That'll be neat. But yeah, check me out on Blue Sky. It seems nice. It feels just like Twitter, but not like a bunch of crap. So kind of cool.
One of the first 10, 20
yeah.
followers. Awesome.
What do you got, Amy?
I'm going to plug a new game that I've been playing with my kids. Happy Little Dinosaurs. Alex, I know you're a board gamer. Have you played that one?
Which one is that? Is that
the
one where you're trying to avoid the extinction event or whatever it is? Yeah.
Yes. So there's a element of war to it that I'm not crazy about war just because that means there's like this element of luck. I'm like, I'd rather there be some strategy, but there is some strategy in this game because you can like play a low card and then swap for a high card. Or I've also enjoyed playing when there's more people versus just like me and my son playing. It makes it a little bit more interesting, but he's a big fan of Unstable Unicorns, which is another card game, and it's done by the same people. So we bought the base game and then we got the expansion pack so we can play with up to 6 players.
Oh, nice.
But we've been playing that at home. So check that out. It's called Happy Little Dinosaurs.
Is it good for like young kids, 6 and 7?
Yeah, they could totally play.
Sweet.
Yeah, we Emma's 7. We played with her the other day too. So
awesome.
No, I lied. We played with Adele. She's 8. Just 1 year difference. But yeah, they could play. And are your kids reading?
Yeah, son is like just ramping up. Our daughter's doing pretty well.
It
Yeah.
should be I think it should be fine. There's some cards where you have to read to see what it says, but you could help them. It really wouldn't be a big deal. And then for my plug, if you're listening to this in the audio format, this will have already happened, but go check out the website because you can still get the recording. Tomorrow is Halloween. I am doing freaking full stack. It's a 3-hour workshop. We will be building a Hacker News clone. So if you go to freakingfullstack.com, you can register. Like I said, it's free. There is a recording available, so you can still participate even if it's after the fact. But it should be a good time. So far, we have over 500 people registered. So I was really hoping to get up to 1,000, which I know people are last minute. We might be able to hit it. We'll see. So
That's a lot. That's a lot. 1,000 people. It'd be crazy.
well, so I'm doing it through StreamYard, and StreamYard maxes out at 1,000. So space is limited. If it ends up being more than 1,000 people, they will be forced to watch the recording. So anyways, good times. I think that's it. Thanks, Alex, so much for coming on and talking about CSS and a few spicy takes in there.
Yeah.
Thank you, everybody that hung out in the chat or was participating live. And we will catch you maybe next week. We'll see. If not, definitely 2 weeks. For now, that's all we got.
See ya.
Awesome. Okay. We can go ahead and call it. Alex, I will send you a link so we can schedule that view episode.
Sure. Yeah.
Sweet. All right. Thanks, everybody. Bye.
Bye.